Call me crazy, but they should keep Antonio Brown. Let's not act like Antonio Brown, when he came into the NFL, the first 8 or 9 years was arguably the best receiver in the NFL. You look at his reception, you look at his touchdowns, you look at his target rate. All the numbers are out there. Go ahead and call me a numbers guy if you want. When you dominate for almost a decade, I mean, come on, guys. Literally, when you're with that type of production, people are going to call on you. Chris Godwin's had one breakout year. Chris Godwin's rumored to leave. Chris Godwin had an effective season, but he was still a letdown from that top 5 to 7 position. People were really putting Chris Godwin as better than Mike Evans, which absolutely blew my mind. Mike Evans is
boat. Yeah. Boat. Pencil. Woo. Yeah. Hey. You ain't know about it, but you know it now. You say you gotta hear it from the golden mouth. That's that. Go talk. That's that. Go talk. That's that. Go talk. That's that. Go talk. Hey. Worldwide, but I'm so south. They say you gotta hear it from the golden mouth. That's that. Go talk. That's that. Go talk.
This episode is powered by PodDecks.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Go Talk podcast, powered by PodDecks. Today, we're once again joined by Adam from One Off Season Podcast. Adam was with us on our preview of Championship Sunday about a month or so ago now. So if you haven't already, be sure to check out that video. But welcome back to the show, Adam. How have you been since last time we've spoken?
Man, I'm doing great. You know, the NFL season is wrapping up, free agency and the off season's going ballistic, and I know we're going to dig into a great division today, so I'm ready to do it, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's always a pleasure to talk football with you on and off camera. As you mentioned, we are digging into a great division today. Your division, home of your New Orleans Saints. Today, we're going to be talking about the NFC South and recapping just all 4 teams and their seasons that they had and what to expect in the offseason. So we're going to start with the team that won the division, the New Orleans Saints. They finished the season 12-4. Obviously, it was expected that this season would be Drew Brees' last season. While he hasn't officially renounced retirement, most people around the league and most fans are expecting that last season was Drew Brees' last season in the NFL. With that being said, obviously someone has to fill his shoes, and those are very big shoes to fill. The Saints right now have Taysom Hill under contract. Taysom Hill is a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. He can throw the ball, he can catch the ball, he can run the ball. Doesn't have much under his belt in terms of passing the ball, but he has done it. And then, of course, there's Jameis Winston. The thing with Jameis Winston, though, is he is a free agent, one of several free agents in this upcoming season. So, as a fan, I know we talked about this before, you expect Drew Brees to retire. If you have to pick between Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill to start come week 1 next season, who are you looking at? Who do you expect is going to get the nod for the starting job?
I expect Jameis to get the nod for the job, man. I'd love to see Taysom get out there. You know, I feel like I might be one of the only Saints fans that's actually advocating for Taysom Hill to get some time, but I've seen it with my eyes. If there's one thing that you've learned watching football and just any sport is trust your eyes. Trust what your eyes tell you. Separate your emotions, separate the numbers, and just trust what your eyes tell you. Can this player actually do this? And you've seen Taysom Hill can move the ball. He can throw the ball. Yes, he can be accurate, and he can have his days where he's off his game, but any player like that can come into the NFL. I feel like if you put Taysom Hill under that Sean Payton offense and under just the office in general of the New Orleans Saints and all of that personnel, that he can be dealt to success. And you look at Jameis Winston as well. We all know, obviously, him with the turnover problem, but he can move the ball as well. He can get his yards and he can throw his touchdowns, but he's also going to throw the other team interceptions as well. I expect Jameis to get the nod because, you know, that's what we've heard with the reports, but I would totally be happy to see Taysom Hill getting out there and getting a start for the Saints because that's fresh, not a whole lot of tape on him. And obviously, if you get tape on player, people are saying, you know, yeah, you can figure him out. But like I said, any NFL players like that, we can't necessarily discount, in my opinion, Taysom Hill as being the starter for the Saints because there's no what am I trying to say here? There's no necessarily, what's it called, man? I'm totally there's basically there's no tape on him, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. You know, like he can get the freshness of that for the Saints, and we know he can stretch the field. So I would love to see Taysom get the start, but I think Jameis is going to.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think you mentioned a very important part about whether or not Jameis Winston really gets to start, and that's the turnover issue. I've said religiously on the show, off the show, to you and to others. Jameis Winston's not a bad quarterback. The only issue is his turnover problem.
Right.
I've said recently that the Buccaneers, they won the Super Bowl, and we'll talk about them in a second. And you know, congrats to them. But the Buccaneers didn't suck the year before last year. Like they didn't suck 2 years ago before they won the Super Bowl. They were 7-9 with Jameis Winston, and the only reason they were 7-9 was because of the 30 interceptions that he thrown. Jameis Winston went out there. He also threw for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. So to your point, both of these guys are very talented. I think the thing that makes Taysom Hill interesting, as you mentioned, is Taysom Hill is the shiny new toy.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of quarterback tape.
What I was trying to say.
Yeah. There's no quarterback tape on Taysom Hill. Like, obviously, because he hasn't done it a lot, because there's been the Drew Brees and because there's been, at a point, there was Teddy Bridgewater, and there's also, we've seen Jameis Winston pop his head in there a few times as well. Taysom Hill, he can return kicks for you. He can return punts for you. He can catch the ball outside in the slot at the tight end position. He can run the ball for you. I think if you start Taysom Hill, there's a chance that you would be giving up a lot of that for the Saints. And I think a lot of those trick plays and a lot of those gadget plays in today's NFL could be the difference between winning and losing games. I'm right there with you. I think Taysom Hill would be for a more exciting offense at the quarterback position because there's not a lot of tape on him. But I think the more if you want to win games in what is proving to be a competitive division, at least since Tom Brady is going to be in Tampa Bay next year, at least, is the fact that you got to win games. The Saints did an amazing job this season. They won the two most important games of the season. That was both games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they did it in convincing fashion as well. And a lot of that plays to defense as well, because this offense, outside of Alvin Kamara, was really struggling from start to finish. That includes, obviously, Drew Brees as well. I think in terms of next season, you want to have the quarterback that's going to give yourself the best position to win, and that's Jameis Winston. I do want to ask you this, though. We've seen a lot, like in Miami, for example, the two quarterback system, where one quarterback can start the game and another quarterback can finish the game. It's been said over the years in football that if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterback, because that's two completely different identities. And then that's true. Winston and Hill have two completely different playing styles. Do you think it's possible that the Saints explore the idea of starting Winston for some games and starting Hill for some games, depending on who's coming up on the schedule? Do you think that's something that Sean Payton and the Saints coaching staff would legitimately consider?
I think so, man, because you look at just the wise guy aspect of Sean Payton, trying to outthink the room, trying to always have the craziest plays, trying to always run the cutest stuff when it's not necessarily what he might need to do. Now, whether he will or won't do that with the two quarterbacks and whether the Saints do or don't need that is a different story. But as far as him actually taking the attempt to deploy that system, I think he absolutely could. And, just going back to Jameis, man, he could be put in there for some plays where we just want a simple pass, maybe a little 5 to 10 yard play. And then for Taysom, when we're wanting to run a quarterback power, or if we're trying to run some crossers over the field where we might need more of a quick release or more of a gunner type of mentality to execute that play. So I definitely think Sean Payton could employ deploy the double quarterback system.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it'd be an interesting system to deploy because it's two completely different identities. And I think in the case of the Saints, that's not at all a bad thing. We talk about Taysom Hill and his explosiveness. You open the door in terms of a lot of different things that we've never really seen in the Saints offense since Drew Brees has been there. You talk about wildcat formations and all these different things that you can deploy with Taysom Hill running point on that offense. I think that'd be something that I don't know if, obviously we don't know if they're legitimately considering that down in New Orleans with what they're doing. But I think it's something that, as you mentioned, Sean Payton is out of the box. I mean, we've seen in the Super Bowl, he opened the second half.
Wise guy.
Yeah, no one kicks off an onside kick on in the second half. Like it's just he's gonna find ways to get that competitive advantage. And maybe that's the way that you want to do that. I do want to switch gears also, just sticking with the Saints though. I want to switch gears, talk about Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas has been considered in many circles a top 5 receiver in the league. Some people would go as far to say he's the best receiver in the league. Obviously, he missed most of last season dealing with injuries and just suspensions within the team and things like that. He did play in the Saints divisional round loss to the Buccaneers, though, so that was the last time we did see him. And he said that he wanted to do that because he wanted to be there for Drew's last game. Do you think Michael Thomas comes back next year as what he once was, which was a top 5, maybe even the best receiver in the league just 2 years ago?
I don't know, man. It's going to be kind of hard because there's a lot of film on Michael Thomas. There's no doubt Michael Thomas is a great receiver. If he's healthy next year, he should be top 5, top 3, wherever people want to put him. He's going to be in that elite receiver category. But he's got to stay healthy. You know, that was the whole thing about Michael Thomas last year is Breeze, Thomas, and Kamara didn't play a whole lot of games together last year. Thomas was still productive when he was on the field, but that's when he was on the field. And oddly enough, he only missed a little less than half the season. A lot of people think Michael Thomas only played like 2 or 3 games because that's really how it felt. Like me as a Saints fan, I really felt we got to see Michael Thomas, like 100% Michael Thomas, maybe 2 or 3 times last year. All the other times he was hobbled, you know, just not 100% getting into the game like we needed him to be, which was what made that Saints offense so lethal the past few years. But of course, I think Michael Thomas could get back to that level. It's going to be tough, though, because, well, actually, let me scale that back a little bit. It will be tough. Instead of saying, you know, Michael Thomas, I think he could get back to that level. It's going to be tough because if you have Taysom Hill or if you have Jameis Winston throwing you the football, that's 2 different guys. That's not your Drew Brees. That's going to have at a bare minimum 72, 73% completion. He's going to be in unison, literally living in your mind as you run that slant, as you run that in or out route. You know, you're going to have to throw that. You're going to have to, grow that chemistry and just instill that confidence and grow it between the two of you to make you that elite receiver, because you look at every elite receiver and quarterback combo, not even a quarterback, but an elite receiver getting fed by a quarterback. There's always that marriage. There's always that unison. And he's going to have to establish that with Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, hell, maybe Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, I'm hoping as a Saints fan, but we'll see Michael Thomas next year. He's going to have to hope, or at least not hope. He's going to have to work on that marriage with his quarterback to establish that status.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I was actually going to ask you, do you think it's possible that the Saints outsource for their quarterback situation? I mean, Jameis Winston is a free agent. It is possible that they decide not to re-up on that and sign him for a long-term deal if they choose that they don't want Winston to start. Do you think it's possible that they might outsource and look for maybe a Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, or maybe even someone within their own division, like, say, a Matt Ryan, if the Falcons decide to blow it up, which we'll get into a little bit later in the show?
Absolutely. So Matt Ryan would never go to the Saints. Just put that out there.
Of course. Absolutely not.
But I mean, they could outsource, you know, like I just said, you know, I would love to see Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson be in a Saints uniform. I'm just, as a Saints fan, Drew Brees has held us back for the last 4 seasons, and being held back by a small arm and just not being able to stretch the field and using screens and using dink and dunk plays. I want to get someone in there that can stretch the field. Luckily, all 4 of those that I mentioned, Hill, Winston, Wilson, or Watson, can all stretch the field. Now, who will it be for the Saints? I don't necessarily, not even necessarily, I don't see the Saints outsourcing a quarterback just because Sean Payton said it. We've got our guy of the future here. We've got the guy that we want to work with. It's either going to be Taysom or Jameis. The smart thing the Saints are going to do, because they've basically already said it, is Jameis is going to be the starter, and then Hill's going to serve the other roles like you mentioned. But outsourcing, I don't see that happening.
I agree with you. I mean, I think, number one, I don't think the Saints necessarily can afford Deshaun Watson, not just from a money standpoint, but from what it would take to pry Deshaun Watson out of Houston. As much as Deshaun Watson wants to leave, he is still under contract. And if Houston decides they're not going to trade him, they're not going to trade him. I mean, the last time we talked, I made what at that time was a hot take. Before it, I established hot takes on the show, and I said that Deshaun Watson's never going to play another snap in Houston. And I went as far as to say maybe you could get a sign and trade with Watson and Prescott. Fast forward a few weeks, I turn on First Take one day. Stephen A. Smith says the same thing. I felt good about myself. And we've seen other people say the same thing, too, about maybe Deshaun Watson being traded to the Cowboys for Dak Prescott. We've seen numbers of other people say that Deshaun Watson's not going to play another snap. Deshaun Watson has recently, in the last few days, said he's not playing another snap for Houston because he's done with the franchise. I would love to see Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson in the Saints uniform. I think it would open up a side of the Saints that we haven't seen in a very long time in terms of explosiveness, because this is an explosive game. We have a lot of quarterbacks with a big arm. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. There's a lot of young guys and a lot of older guys as well that can sling the football and can throw and can blow the top off the defense. The Saints haven't had that in terms of blowing the top off the defense from a passing aspect. Of course, they have Alvin Kamara, who is a top 5 running back in the league. You could argue he's top 3. You could argue he's the best running back in the league, but you'd have to acknowledge he's a top 5 running back in the National Football League. And rightfully so. He was, for all intents and purposes, the Saints offense last year.
Yes, he was.
If I'm not mistaken, he accounted for just about 90% of the offensive snaps, somewhere around there. So Alvin Kamara is a big deal. He is the real deal. And he is, regardless of who's going to be the quarterback next season, he is going to be, I think, the measuring stick for whether or not the Saints are successful. If Alvin Kamara has a great season next year, we can expect to see the Saints in the playoffs. If he doesn't, we probably won't see the Saints in the playoffs.
Right.
The last thing I want to ask you before we move on to the Buccaneers, do you think the window in terms of the Super Bowl contention, making it to the Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl, do you think the window for the Saints is closed?
It really depends on the quarterback situation. I think out of the 4 guys I've named, I think the Saints could still be in quarterback or in the Super Bowl contention. That's obviously speaking from a fan's heart, but you look at the talent that the Saints have. Like, there's no question about who the Saints are. Everybody on the offense that they have, the young defensive talent, the people in the front office, everybody there is hungry to win a Super Bowl. And the last 4 seasons have really shown the Saints that it's time to get it together. It's time to. I think all 4 seasons have pointed to getting rid of Breeze. And now, not even getting rid of him. He was getting towards the end of his career, but we know he's out the door. It's time to make the right move because, the fans are getting tired of it. The NFL, I'm sure itself, is getting tired of seeing the Saints so great every year, especially the fans, like I just mentioned, seeing the Saints so great every year in the regular season. And then when the postseason comes around, they just choke it away. So I do think the window's still open. Some people are going to think it's closed, but a good bit of the talent is going to come back. We are going to have a good bit of talent leave as well, but the Saints they're going to look different, but we have depth. So I think we could still be in the running, but it's definitely going to be tougher than the last 4 years.
Absolutely. And again, for the Saints, they finished the season last year 12-4, winning the NFC South. If I'm not mistaken, they were the first team to clinch a playoff spot, if I'm not mistaken, out of the entire NFL.
Yep.
I think, if I'm not mistaken. And again, the biggest story for the Saints really is just who's going to start as quarterback position. As Adam mentioned, it's likely going to be Jameis Winston because everyone expects Drew Brees to retire. I don't think anyone in the world expects Drew Brees to say that he's coming back for another season. I would hope for the sake of Drew Brees that he doesn't come back for another season. All the injuries that he suffered last year, mentioning that after his wife mentioning that after the divisional round game, I would hope for the sake of Drew Brees that he calls it a career. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no question about that. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. I think it's time for Drew Brees to hang it up for all the reasons that Adam just mentioned. So switching gears now to another all-time great and his team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously headed by Tom Brady, finished 11-5. They were one of, if I'm not mistaken, they were one of 5 of the last. They won like one of 5 or one of 7 teams to win a Super Bowl after winning or advance to the Super Bowl after winning all road games. I think I fudged the numbers a little bit there. But the point is, Tampa Bay Buccaneers advanced to the Super Bowl in Tom Brady's first season, becoming the first team in history to host the Super Bowl after they defeated my Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game. When you look at the Buccaneers, the interesting thing about all this is they've got a lot of free agents. They got a lot of expiring contracts. What do you think is the likelihood that Tampa Bay can bring back enough of these guys to still be considered a threat in terms of a legitimate contender? Obviously, when you have Tom Brady as your quarterback, you're always going to be considered a contender. We saw that even in his last season in New England. The New England stunk that season, and they were still considered Super Bowl contenders just because of Tom Brady. That's how great he is. There's no denying that. But again, with all these free agents and all these expiring contracts, how likely do you think we see this dominant defense or this dominant offense that we saw much of the later part of last season?
I think it's so question is about the defense?
Both.
Or just the team overall?
Just the team overall in general.
The team overall. So I'm going to go back to when you said, what's the likelihood that they're able to bring everybody back? I think the likelihood's very high. You look at a lot of people that have actually realized their value and they understand that they were just one player away. And I'm even going to go as far as saying, because it's a double-edged sword as well, because, the culture in Tampa Bay before Tom Brady showed up was, okay, we can't win these games. Our quarterback is average. Like, we've never really had a franchise quarterback, and just we're still trying to get over that hump. But a lot of people knew how great the defense was and how much talent they had on the offense. They were just being held back by the quarterback position. Now Tom Brady comes in. Instantly, a lot of names that aren't getting talked about are now getting talked about. Antonio Brown goes from being in prison to a Super Bowl champion. Rob Gronkowski goes from not playing for a whole year and being in retirement to coming out and really should have won Super Bowl MVP, in my opinion, catching 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. You talk about Levante David, Devin White, just the whole Buccaneers team getting the clout. And it was because of Tom Brady. So, of course, they're going to want to replicate that again. They're definitely going to want to bring back people that just took them to a Super Bowl. You have people now saying that Devin White's the best linebacker in football. I think we need to calm down on that a little bit. Very
We do,
versatile,
yeah.
might be the most versatile and might be the most versatile linebacker in football. But let's not forget about our Fred Warners and our Bobby Wagners and our Darius Leonard. Let's think about the others as well. Spotlight on Tampa Bay, no question about it. And they need to take advantage of that. I think Tampa Bay is a great team. I think they're loaded. Obviously, everybody sees who they have on both sides of the football. And the likelihood of them bringing people back is very high next year. Don't be surprised if they restructure Brady's contract so he can make $500,000 to bring in more people, man. I'm being serious. Brady took a lot of pay cuts in New England. He is at an embarrassment of riches in Tampa Bay. He is running it now, man. So the likelihood is very high that Tampa Bay is going to bring back the same squad.
That's true. I agree with you. I want to focus specifically on the wide receiver position because this is the one that I think is really the concern for most people. We have Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, both of which are free agents. Chris Godwin was last season in Winston's last season in Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin was a top 5 receiver that year. Antonio Brown, obviously, as you mentioned, after leaving the Steelers, has really had just this whirlwind of a life. He went to the Raiders and then he left the Raiders and then he was on the Patriots and left the Patriots and he ends up back with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, obviously winning the Super Bowl. So a lot going on in the life of Antonio Brown. Again, you've mentioned that you think it's highly likely that they bring back everyone and they're going to try their best to do so. If it comes down to Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown and the front office has to pick, who do you think they're going to pick? Who do you think they're going to pick to stay, and who do you think they're going to send on their way?
Call me crazy, but they should keep Antonio Brown. Let's not act like Antonio Brown, when he came into the NFL, the first 8 or 9 years was arguably the best receiver in the NFL. You look at his reception, you look at his touchdowns, you look at his target rate. All the numbers are out there. Go ahead and call me a numbers guy if you want. When you dominate for almost a decade, I mean, come on, guys. Literally, when you're with that type of production, people are going to call on you. Chris Godwin's had one breakout year. Chris Godwin's rumored to leave. Chris Godwin had an effective season, but he was still a letdown from that top 5 to 7 position. People were really putting Chris Godwin as better than Mike Evans, which absolutely blew my mind. Mike Evans is probably the second to third best deep threat in the NFL. He is one of the most physical receivers in the NFL. You want to talk about a guy that resembles some Randy and Julio? Come on, man. Mike Evans standing out there at 6'6", 6'7", whatever it is. Chris Godwin is a good receiver. I know I got off on Mike a little bit, but just people were blowing my mind before the season saying that Chris Godwin could potentially be better than Mike Evans, dude. Come on, man. He had one breakout season. I think if they had to come down to it, AB would be cheaper. You could get the experience and the veteran leadership of Antonio Brown. I know he's been through what he's been through, and maybe he'll continue to take the back burner and let Brady do his thing. But I guarantee you I could get that marriage between AB and Brady could say, hey, man, I want you to be the receiver. I want you to be my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 to Mike Evans. I want you to be able to commandeer that wide receiver room like Mike Evans does. Keep Antonio Brown, send Chris Godwin to the Bears or Patriots, wherever you want to take him, man. But I think they should keep AB.
I mean, and I agree with you 100%. Antonio Brown at his best is the best wide receiver on that football team. And I mean, there's no doubting that. As you mentioned, Antonio Brown was dominating the NFL for the better part of 10 years, so much so that
Antonio, and people forget that.
Right, we were having constant discussions about Antonio Brown, not just on a year-to-year basis, but on a week-to-week basis. It seemed about whether or not Antonio Brown could potentially surpass the likes of Terrell Owens, the likes of Randy Moss, the likes of Jerry Rice, in terms of being the greatest wide receiver of all time. And these were legitimate conversations we were having about Antonio Brown when he was in Pittsburgh. Granted, he hasn't had, but the unfortunate
appreciate you shedding some light on that.
Of course, no, absolutely. And the unfortunate part of all this is that this is a what have you done for me lately league, and lately Antonio Brown has done nothing for this league. But that doesn't mean you forget the past. Antonio Brown, you want to talk about the effect of Antonio Brown, and I'll talk about this in another episode when we talk about the AFC North. But Juju Smith-Schuster, who was the number 2 receiver in Pittsburgh when Antonio Brown was there, hasn't had a 100-yard game, if I'm not mistaken, since Antonio Brown has left Pittsburgh. Like if you want to talk about just how much of an impact Antonio Brown has, not just on himself, but on his teammates, it goes no further than that. We've got Mr. TikTok himself struggling to eclipse 100. He's averaging about 50 to 60 yards per game as your wide receiver 1. And that's because Antonio Brown is gone. The effect that Antonio Brown has on a team is insurmountable, and it's undisputable. And like I said, the NFL is a what have you done for me league, what have you done for me lately league. Antonio Brown hasn't done much for me lately. But to Adam's point, if the chips are on the table and it comes down to you can only have Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, I think the Buccaneers front office would be fools to pick Chris Godwin over Antonio Brown. Does Chris Godwin have a brighter future ahead of him? Absolutely, he does. He's got more fuel in the tank than Antonio Brown.
How old is
Sure.
AB?
But like Antonio Brown's also not that old. If I'm not mistaken, Antonio Brown might be just entering his 30s. He's like
32.
32. Yeah,
He's getting up there, but he can still produce.
Absolutely, he can still produce, and he doesn't have to be a wide receiver one. Are we forgetting about Mr. Mike Evans on the other side? As Adam mentioned, he's 6'6". I think he's like 6'6".
Mike Evans is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, and I'll argue that any day, bro. Mike Evans is a monster.
Absolutely, I would go as far to say I think he's a top 3 wide receiver in the league. I think the only 2 wide receivers that have a legitimate claim to being better than Mike Evans, I think, are Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. I think you can throw Devontae Adams in there because of the season that Devontae Adams had last year. But those are really the only 3 guys that I think that you can make a legitimate claim for could compete in terms of saying they're better than Mike Evans. That includes Chris Godwin. Antonio Brown at his best. You can add Antonio Brown to all this. Antonio Brown at his best is light years ahead of Mike Evans. He's smaller than Mike Evans. Yes, he has that speed, though. He still has the hands. He has the quickness, the agility. Like, why are we forgetting who Antonio Brown is and what he was?
Right.
If Antonio Brown gets his,
my point, brother. Chris Godwin's had one good year.
Absolutely, I truly believe if Antonio Brown comes back next season with his head screwed on tight, understanding the circumstances,
he's
having
a champion now.
A complete off season of prep without any distractions, without prison or any of this other goofiness that he was involved in for the last 2 years. Antonio Brown could very easily lead the league in receptions next year, lead the league in yards next year, lead the league in touchdowns next year, because that's how great he is. And I think we have to acknowledge the greatness of Antonio Brown, despite what recent history will tell you. Antonio Brown, in what was it, like 8 games, had 45 catches, almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns last season for the Buccaneers. Like,
there you go.
Godwin had 65 for 840 and 7. So he pretty much had double the receptions almost, if you give or take 15. And had double the yards. So, like, if Antonio Brown had the receptions that Godwin had, do you think that this would be a conversation? Do you think if Antonio Brown had 65 receptions, he wouldn't have had 1,000 yards last season? He wouldn't have had at least 10 touchdowns last season? That's how great Antonio Brown is. Like, what are we doing here? Chris Godwin.
Let's act like if he was there for the whole 16.
Absolutely. If he was there for the whole 16, there's no doubt in my mind Mike Evans and Antonio Brown would have been the best wide receiver duo in the league last season. That includes a Tyreek Hill and a Travis Kelce. Like, that includes any other combo you want to throw out there, a CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, or like whatever the case may be. Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin would have been, Antonio Brown and Mike Evans, would have been the best duo in the offseason. I think in this upcoming season, if they keep Antonio Brown, like Adam and I both think they will, Antonio Brown and Mike Evans will be the best wide receiver duo next season if Antonio Brown is still in Tampa Bay, even if Chris Godwin is there too. I think if both come back, Godwin's going to be reduced to that 3rd string role because Antonio Brown's back. I think he understands now that time is important. I think he understands now that he doesn't have that much time left. He is a champion now, and he's going to go out there and he's going to play like the champion that he is. And we're going to see Antonio Brown next season come back with a vengeance, and it's going to be great to see. Antonio Brown is great, and I don't know why we've lost sight of that. I really don't. I don't know how we've lost sight of that. It's just been it's crazy to think 10 years of dominance, and all of a sudden, because he loses his mind a little bit, we just forget that he can still go out there and he can give you 1,200, 1,300, maybe even 1,500 yards on 15 to 20 touchdowns a season. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Chris Godwin is not better than Antonio Brown, and that's just the fact of the matter. And I don't know. I understand Chris Godwin had 1,000 yards the year before this past season, but okay, Antonio Brown has had 1,000 yards 8 years in his career. He missed 2 seasons, and he's going to come back next year and get 1,000 yards again, and you can book it. Like, he'll have 1,000 yards next year, and you can bank that. And
take it to the bank.
You can hold me to it. You can hold me to it. Antonio Brown will have 1,000 yards and at least 12 touchdowns next season, and you can, barring injury, of course, if he's healthy, he'll have 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. I'm off my soapbox though. I just wanted to say that. I'm not at all a Steelers fan for sure. I'm the farthest thing from a Steelers fan, but you like Adam said at the top of the show. Sometimes you have to get rid of the numbers and just look at your eyes. Your eyes tell you that Antonio Brown is a much better receiver than Chris Godwin. So let's stop this. Let's stop the nonsense. Numbers are great. At the end of the day, there are players that are just better at the game despite the numbers. Bless you.
Excuse me.
Bless you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. When we discuss Julio Jones, I think Julio Jones is still the best wide receiver in the league, despite the fact that he's been plagued with injury and despite the fact he's in a terrible situation in Atlanta. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. Nonetheless, now that we're both off our soapboxes about Antonio Brown, The Buccaneers are still betting favorites, one of the betting favorites to win Super Bowl 56 in LA next season. Switching gears now from the two elites of the division, going now down to the bottom feeders of the division. The Panthers were 5-11 this season. It was really a tumultuous season for the Panthers injury-wise. Obviously, McCaffrey struggled most of the season due to injury. He only played 3 games. In those 3 games, he had 60 some odd carries, something like that. He was still productive in those 3 games. There's no denying that when Christian McCaffrey is on the field, the Panthers are better. Christian McCaffrey is on the field for about 99% of the Panthers snaps. It's like 95 to 99% of the Panthers snaps since he's been in the league. Christian McCaffrey is a top 5 running back when he's healthy, and I think we all know that. So
he's top 3, maybe top 2, if not the best when he's healthy, man.
Absolutely. So the loss of Christian McCaffrey was a big one. Do you think Christian McCaffrey, obviously, comeback's healthy? I mean, I don't think it's going to matter much. I don't think the Panthers are going to be a threat at all. Do you think they'll have a better season, though, in terms of just strictly win record? Do you think they'll win more games with Christian McCaffrey being back next season?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. Like I just said, Christian McCaffrey might be the best running back in the NFL when he's healthy. You look at a guy that can, first running back to do 1,000 in the air on the ground, the way that he can run screens for you, the way that he can bounce on the outside, the way he can take it up the middle. He is an all-around guy. He can be that bell cow back. He can be that screen guy. He can be that sweep guy. He can be anything. You can be anything, or he can be anything that you want him to be. So Christian McCaffrey, I think, will definitely make the Panthers better next season, man. No question about it.
Absolutely. And I think the other interesting thing too, not just about the Panthers and Christian McCaffrey, but really just about what's going on. They're in a really good position, I think, and it's a position that I don't think a lot of people realize that they're in. The Panthers aren't expected to do anything right now. A lot of people are expecting the Panthers to go in the draft and look for a quarterback. Obviously you lose Luke Kuechly, so that's obviously going to play a big role. Like your defense obviously not going to be the same without Luke Kuechly, so that's something that they have to address as well, and I expect them to in the draft. But the thing about the Panthers is they're also still their first year in a new offense in a new system with Matt Rule, and I think that's another thing you have to consider. We have anomalies where the first year in a system is a good season. You take, for example, the Packers last season and Matt LaFleur's first year, they were 13-3. Yeah, but it was a really bad 13-3. Like, they were one of the worst 13-3 teams of all time. Like, winning games, losing games they were supposed to win, winning games that they should have lost. Like, we sucked that first year. We came back and we did it again, and we were much more convincing 13-3 team. But the first year is always a rocky season. So even if Christian McCaffrey doesn't come back 100% himself, if you can at least get Christian McCaffrey in more than 3 games this season, if he's at least in 8 games, because there's no denying Christian McCaffrey is a game changer for the Panthers, and there's no doubt about that. When you lose the guy that it makes up for 90% of your offense, yeah, you're not going to win a lot of games. That's just how it works. If Christian McCaffrey's back, he's going to be healthy. I expect he will play the entire 16, and he will be the best running back in the league if that is the case.
Oh yeah,
I think there's only one other guy that can argue that, and that's Alvin Kamara up in New Orleans. But like, if he comes back and he's healthy, you've got Teddy Bridgewater, who I think should be the starter no matter if they draft whether they draft a quarterback or not. This offense had its moments last year. And it'll be the second year in this system. I think we'll get their footing. I think the Panthers can break 8 games in terms of winning 8 games next season. When you consider all those things, Teddy Bridgewater is not a bad quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater completed almost 70% of his passes. He threw for almost 4,000 yards. He had 15 touchdowns. Of course, he had the 11 interceptions as well. But he's not a bad quarterback. He can win you football games. And he's also he's not the dual threat to the likes of a Russell Wilson or a Kyler Murray, but he can do it with his legs when he has to. We saw that several times over the season as well. I think this Panthers team, despite being 5-11, I think they're in good shape. I think it only goes up from here. I think next season will be the best season they've had since they've won the Super Bowl. I think this team next year can go 8-8. I think it's possible, but this is a very sneaky team. And when they, if they can get in the right spot, I think we could see them winning 8 games, maybe even 9. I don't know, but I think they're going to at least improve this by 2. I think they go anywhere between 7 and 9 games next season. Obviously, we can adjust those predictions after the draft and as the season gets closer. But the Panthers are definitely on the rise for sure. That is really the point that I'm making, is that they are on the come up for sure.
They do have a lot of talent, man. They do have a lot of talent. They shouldn't be slept on, because they could be one of those odd teams, kind of like how the Colts were this year, how they kind of just came up. Nobody thought they were going to be good. I called the Colts being good this year, but kind of how Indianapolis shocked everyone. We'll see, man. We'll see.
And the other thing too, and I just want to touch on this when we talk about Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, as you mentioned, the first running back in NFL history to rush 4,000 and receive 4,000. This is a guy that if he gets a quarterback that can do his job, right, and you have receivers that can do their job, the load of Christian McCaffrey is taken off a lot. This wide receiver core in Carolina, it's not the best, but it's not at all the worst either. This is a competent wide receiver core that they have in Carolina. It's a wide receiver core that we've seen in certain games that can go out there and there were instances where we had receivers go for 100 yards in some of these games. So this is a team, as you mentioned, much like the Colts this year, although I expected, just like you, I expected the Colts to be good. I didn't expect them to be this good. But I did expect them to be good this season. I had them winning 9 games. I didn't think they were going to go out there, win 11 and make the playoffs though. This is a team that could easily win 9-10 games next year if the pieces fall in line, if they catch that flow. Because the thing about the NFL is on any given Sunday, anything can happen. And if a team catches lightning in a bottle, they can take it all the way. We saw the Buccaneers do it. Granted, the Buccaneers are much better, but like the Buccaneers caught lightning in a bottle. They won their last 11 games. They won their last 7 games of the regular season, and then they won obviously their 4 games that they played in the postseason. The Washington football team did the same thing. They caught lightning in a bottle towards the end of the year. They lost 1 game of their last 6, if I'm not mistaken. So like, momentum is a big deal in the NFL, no matter who you're going up against. And I think this is a team that can definitely catch lightning in a bottle, get that momentum, and maybe make a push for the playoffs. The last team that we'll talk about, obviously, is the Atlanta Falcons, and they were just completely a dumpster fire this year, to say the least. Trash, yeah. And you can look no further than the several double-digit leads that were blown. They had the Cowboys down 20-0. They ended up losing 40-39. I don't know how that happened. And I feel really bad for Matt Ryan, because despite all of that, Matt Ryan completed 65% of his passes, had 4,600 yards, threw for 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Like, Matt Ryan doesn't get the credit he deserves because the Falcons sucks. I think Matt Ryan falls in that same category of Matt Stafford, who they're great quarterbacks, but they're on really bad teams. And no matter how great you are, you need other people around you to win you football games. Obviously, they were without Julio Jones last season because of injury. He only played 9 games, which is more than half the season, but it's only 9 games. It's not the availability that they would have liked. Do you think the Falcons can turn it around this season, next season, or do you think the Falcons are just going to blow it up and just try to rebuild?
Hey, man, so, being here in the metro Atlanta area and always listening to the talk shows and all the conspiracies around the Falcons and what everyone's thinking about them, the city is about 90% bought in on getting a quarterback. And me, Saints fan, for disclaimer for anybody who's watching, I don't think the Falcons should go get a quarterback. I think Matt Ryan could be the quarterback of the Falcons for the next 5 years. There's nothing wrong with Matt Ryan. You talk about a guy that's consistently top 5 to 7 every year in completions, yards, touchdown to interception ratio, QBR. Like you just named it, man. Matt Ryan is consistently playing good football. You want to hear something crazy? Matt Ryan won the MVP in 2016 with like a 35 touchdowns, 7 picks, something like that, for whatever it was, a little over 4,000 yards. 2018. Just about the same thing, but the Falcons went 7-9. Matt Ryan was not getting talked about. Just about the same MVP numbers, but not the same record. He was in the Super Bowl the year he won the MVP. Obviously didn't make the playoffs when the numbers were alike and nobody was talking about him. I think Matt Ryan is a good to great quarterback. Now, the reason he's not great is because he cannot overcome bad coaching. He can't overcome a bad situation. It's got to be all there spelled out for him. He's not going to get you out of a rut like a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers or a Mahomes or a Deshaun Watson will, but he will win you a game just as good as any of those guys. And Matt Ryan could win you a Super Bowl. The Falcons can turn it around. They need to establish one hell of an offensive line, and they need to get some defensive players in there as well, because they are just struggling in both of those aspects. If the Seattle Seahawks did not exist at some point last season, the Falcons would have been the worst defense in the NFL for the better part of the season. So the Falcons need to get some help on the offensive line. Matt Ryan is getting the snot beat out of him, getting sacked. I mean, it's ridiculous. I feel like his sack numbers go up every year, and he's throwing to guys like Julio Jones, who you still think is the best receiver in the NFL, a guy like Calvin Ridley, who could go somewhere else and be a wide receiver 1. Hayden Hurst is out there. If the Falcons can pilfer through the draft and get a running back, the Falcons could be Super Bowl contenders next year if they just get those few aspects addressed from the team, because they've had a good team for a while. but it's always bad coaching. Look at the Browns winning 11 games this year versus the year before with Freddie Kitchens. They were what, 4 or 5 wins? It's all about coaching, man. Coaching far surpasses talent in the NFL. I made a podcast on it. Go check it out, guys. If you haven't, it literally just explains why you can have the most talent in the NFL, but if you don't have the coaching, you're not going to go anywhere. Look at the year the Patriots won the Super Bowl. They were never loaded. They just had competent teams with exceptional elite coaching.
Absolutely. And I'll go as far as, and I'll agree with you with that. I think the Falcons could very easily be Super Bowl contenders. And I'm going to talk about this in another episode later in this series. I think the Chargers could be Super Bowl contenders next year.
Of course.
Did you see what Justin Herbert did last season? I mean, he threw for 30 touchdowns. He went to war with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And I don't remember what week it was. It was like 42-45, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. He almost beat Tom Brady.
Played Patrick Mahomes as his first start with a 5-minute notice.
Absolutely. And he played phenomenally in that game as well. I think the Chargers could be Super Bowl contenders. The defense that we ranted and we raved about in the offseason obviously took some injuries. Obviously, Derwin James wasn't there, which I think Derwin James is the best at his position in the league when he's healthy. Obviously, they had that duo of Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. There was a lot of injuries on that defense as well. But again, like you said, talent, no matter how much talent you have, if you don't have someone calling the shots the right way, you're not going to win football games. Look no further than the Dallas Cowboys. Every year we talk about the talent that the Dallas Cowboys has. Every year they can't get over the hump. It's not because of the talent. They've got Dak Prescott, who's
trash coaching, man.
It's all about the coaching. So, you can cut it up however you want it. At the end of the day, it takes talent and it takes coaching. And like Adam said, if you haven't checked out that video that he posted recently about that, I will be sure to include that in the link below so that you guys can check that out. I agree with you. I'm right there, man. I think the Falcons, of course, could very easily be Super Bowl contenders next year. They've got Matt Ryan, who has consistently over the last few years since they've made the Super Bowl, Matt Ryan has consistently had at least 4,000 yards and at least 20 touchdowns in each of those seasons.
Right.
So he's a talented, and he's been completing anywhere between 60 and 68% of his passes over that course of time. And he's had a very solid QBR. I prefer QBR over pass rating because QBR takes into a lot more consideration. This past season, he had a 100.5 QBR. That was like a top 15 QBR in the league, if I'm not mistaken. So Matt Ryan can ball. Julio Jones, as I said earlier, I think Julio Jones, when he's healthy, is the best wide receiver in the league. I do think, however, that Julio Jones should leave. I think the Falcons should move on from Julio Jones, not because Julio Jones can't play. I just think to address the things that Adam mentioned, the defense and the offense, I think you can move Julio Jones there are a lot of teams in the NFL that need a receiver that would love to trade for Julio Jones. I mean, Julio Jones, even though he's up there in age and even though he dealt with injury, Julio Jones is still a rare commodity in this league. Julio Jones, they might not want to spend an arm and a leg, but there are some teams that would be willing to sacrifice an arm or a leg to get Julio
right.
Jones. So it's he's still valuable. I think Julio Jones could be traded for something for a considerable piece, a running back or a defensive player, an offensive lineman or something like that you mentioned. The Falcons have the 4th overall pick in the draft. Obviously the mock drafts are rolling in because draft is fastly approaching. You've mentioned running backs and wide receivers, offensive linemen. When we look at specifically the quarterback position, again, you and I are both under the mindset that they don't really need to draft a quarterback because Matt Ryan's not a bad quarterback. He can win you football games. Do you think that the Falcons will go into the quarterback market? And if so, who do you think they're going to draft with that 4th pick?
If they do go into the quarterback market, they need to go after Justin Fields. There's no question about that. He is probably going to be sitting there. Everyone's going to get picked through in the draft, and I feel like the best decision they do have is Justin Fields. There could be a Zach Wilson, but I think he's going to go number 2 overall to the Jets. You could see Justin Fields go to the Jets at number 2, and the Falcons could slip and get Zach Wilson. There's a lot of quarterbacks that they could pick from in the draft, but I don't think they will go quarterback. Like I said, Matt Ryan's not the problem. Matt Ryan is not the problem, and a lot of Falcons fans should actually be happy and feel lucky that Matt Ryan is still with the franchise because of how much crap he's put up with and still produced. Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson are kind of in the same situation. Maybe Matt Ryan's going to start talking here soon and wanting to get out. People would pay money for Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has a value in today's market. He might be worth 4 or 5 picks or what a Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson might be worth, but Matt Ryan's got value in the market. So I don't think they'll quarterback, but if they did, Justin Fields has to be the answer.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. Look, Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson have each been consummate professionals since they won the league. They don't even have as much as a parking ticket since they've been in the NFL. And I said, like they are the true model citizens. They're going to say what you want them to say. They're going to do what they want you to do. But there's a point when enough is enough. I think Russell Wilson is getting to that point, and we've seen that over the course of the last few days in terms of how that's unfolded. He just told the Seahawks the teams he would like to go to. I think I agree with you. I think it's possible that Matt Ryan takes that same route. I think we could see Matt Ryan in the near future begin to tell the Falcons that these are the teams that he would like to go to. And if you do want to hear a trade for me, these are only teams I will accept going to, because Matt Ryan deserves that right. If nothing else, like if you're going to move on from Matt Ryan deserves to pick where he wants to go for all that he's done for this organization. Again, leading this team to the Super Bowl. In recent memory, it wasn't that long ago.
Nope.
We're in this, this pandemic, and so that our days seem to run together, but it wasn't that long ago that this team was in the Super Bowl, and this team had one of the best offenses in the league. I think this is a team, to your point, I agree with you. I think if they are going to go quarterback, they would go Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields would fit best in this offense. Obviously, it'd be a new offense with a new head coach, but they don't need a quarterback. They need a running back. They need an offensive line. They need a defense. I think if they get all those things together, or at least get on the road to get those things together, I agree with you. I think we could be looking at the Falcons as legitimate Super Bowl contenders as the season progresses. Julio Jones, when he's healthy, as I've said several times over the course of this episode, is the best wide receiver in the league. You can book it. Matt Ryan can win you football games. He's not going to overcome bad coaching, as Adam mentioned. He's going to win you football games. Look no further than last season. They only won 4 games. He still threw for 4,500 yards. I mean, it doesn't get any more cut and dry than that. He's going to go out there. He's going to win you football games. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So before we go, I just want to say, if you had to order these teams 1 to 4 in terms of who's going to win the division, like how they're going to shake out at the end of the division, what are you looking at? How do you think this division is going to shake up?
So I'm going to say Bucs are going to win the division. Saints are going to be second. Falcons third. I don't know, man, because if the Panthers get Deshaun Watson, that's going to be crazy. Yeah. God, Deshaun Watson is such a question. I mean, if Deshaun Watson comes in there, hell, you could have Carolina winning the division for all I'm concerned.
That's true.
But I'm gonna say no matter what happens, Bucs win the division. Tom Brady is probably going to have a career year next year. And I'm not even trying to be like, oh, he's going to be so much better. He's going to be turned to the MVP status. No, I just think Tom Brady's going to be more locked in. He's going to be with the same guys, with the same coach. He's on top of the world, bro. He just won the Super Bowl. He is going to be going for number 8 next year, and there's no question about that. But I think Bucs will win the division. I'm going to say Saints second, and then I'm going to say Falcon. God, I don't know, man. I'm going to say Falcons third, and I'm going to say Panthers fourth, because Deshaun Watson go to the Panthers it's I can't even begin to give a legit answer. I know you hear me struggling over here. It's hard to predict this division.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. That's true.
I'm going to say Panthers are fourth because for some sneaky reason, I don't think Deshaun's going to go to Carolina. So Bucs win it, Saints second, Falcons third, Panthers fourth.
I would say I agree with you. The only thing I will say is I think if the Falcons can just figure something out, whether it's get a little bit better of an offensive line or get a more reliable running back, I think the Falcons could go second, the Saints go third. But I agree with you. Generally, I think it'll be Bucs, Saints, Falcons, Panthers. But yeah, I think Deshaun Watson is the key. I think Deshaun Watson holds the keys to the NFL right now, just because anywhere he goes could easily become a playoff contender or a Super Bowl contender, depending on where they were last season. I mean, if he goes to the Jets, they could go to the playoffs. He goes to Miami, they can go to the Super Bowl. If he goes to Carolina, as you mentioned, they could go to the playoffs. If he ends up in Washington or San Francisco, they can go to the Super Bowl. I think Washington can go to the Super Bowl with Deshaun Watson. But that's interesting. I'm right there with you though. Bucs, Saints, Falcons, Panthers. But I think Deshaun Watson holds the key to the NFL. Although I'm right there with you as well. Though I don't think he'll go to Carolina. As always, it's a pleasure, talking to you about football on the camera, off camera. To my viewers, if you haven't already, Adam's been up to some really great stuff. He just interviewed former Steelers linebacker LaVon Kirkland. If you haven't checked that out,
yes, sir. Thank you, man.
I'll include the link to that below. He also interviewed former NFL head coach Hugh Jackson. So you check that out as well. I include that in the link in the description below as well. And for any other content from Adam and What Off Season, you can subscribe to his YouTube channel, What Off Season Pod, or follow him on Instagram at What Off Season Pod, What Off SZN Pod. And I'll be sure to include all the information in the description.
Thank you, my man.
Below. Of course, absolutely anything. As always, this episode is powered by PodDecks. You can head over to PodDecks.com. Use code GTP2020 for 10% off your order. We're also an official brand ambassador for Goat Fuel. Head over to goatfuel.com. Use code GOATFAM10, all caps, and get 10% off your order on Goat Fuel. Do you have any last words before you go?
No, I'm good, man. I super appreciate you having me on. Everybody, like you mentioned, be sure to check me out on social. I know he'll hook me up with the links. New episodes every Friday. Always trying to pump out athlete interviews, coach interviews. Got a lot lined up, so stay tuned, guys. And just be sure to support the content. I got you guys back if you're a creator as well. Appreciate y'all as always.
Absolutely, and he also goes live with another guy, Justin, on every Thursday at 8 p.m. So if you want to check that out as well. But like I said, I'll be sure to include all this information below. I know this is a lot, but I'll be sure to include all the information below. As always, Adam, like I said, thank you for stopping by. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to the next one. To my viewers, thank you guys for watching. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the notification bell so you don't miss another episode. And as always, again, thank you, and you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.
Thank you.